So I think now would be a good time to ask some questions. And Richard, Laura mentioned you, Laura, you were mentioned by Richard, and Laura, I'm gonna ask you to move up here and sit over on the chair over there, right there. Laura, if you could tell us, just because Laura can best describe what you used to do, can you tell us what you used to do when you were in Hong Kong?
You mean?
When you were working as a reporter?
In Hong Kong?
Introduce yourself.
Yes, introduce yourself. Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura He. I grew up in the southern part of China, and I went to college in Beijing and worked there for China's largest news agency called Xinhua News Agency, known as New China. And then I went to Hong Kong working as economics reporter for Xinhua for a number of years before I came to Stanford studying for a master's degree in communication. I just graduated in June, and I'm doing an internship at Forbes and writing about wealthy individuals, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and private investment in China.
But Laura, what did you do when you were in Hong Kong? What kind of work did you do? And tell us a little bit about getting back to what Richard was talking about relative to the Great Firewall of China. How, since you lived that.
Great Firewall doesn't exist in Hong Kong because everyone knows that Hong Kong was a British colony until 1997.
And this is why Google moved all its servers out of
Right.
China and into Hong Kong.
That's right, that's right. And people in the mainland China, they can still get on Google, but
Yeah.
the server is very unstable. In Hong Kong, the information flow is free. And newspapers, magazines, they can say whatever they want. However, since 10 years ago, the Communist Party has tried to control the free media.
In Hong Kong.
Yeah, and they are also trying to control the education system, because you know that when children grow up, their ideology, their whole concept is different from their parents, especially toward the mainland China. And what's an interesting fact about Great Firewall is that some people in mainland, they can climb the wall.
Yeah.
They can access YouTube, Facebook, Wikipedia, Twitter. They are all blocked in the mainland. But some people could use kind of technology, and I don't know how to do it, but some like.
Well, I remember that for a long time, most of the Stanford servers were blocked in China. And this was maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
And so we had some students who were cooperating in a US-China program that was happening in Shanghai.
Right.
And I was in a hotel in Shanghai, and I could not send my manuscript out through the Stanford server to, and it was due at a publisher, right? So
that was when?
I freaked, right? I was trying to send out.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
But the thing is, because of the way the email worked, it had to go to the Stanford server and then get a bounce back from the Stanford server and then be sent. And so what happened, remarkably, was somebody talked to some people, and all of the Stanford servers suddenly became open, like within 3 weeks. So, now that was years ago, and probably things have stabilized more.
So Laura, just real quickly to follow up with you, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'll just ask you, in any of the work you've been doing for Forbes in covering, I know you've been covering entrepreneurs for Forbes, Chinese entrepreneurs, is there anything you've noticed or come across about, that relate to cloud computing, that you can add to what Richard has been talking about, and the growth of entrepreneurship and interest in, among Chinese entrepreneurs that relate to cloud computing.
I remember, do you know Robin Li?
Yeah.
The CEO of Baidu, which is the competitor of Google in China. And he is now the richest people in China. And in the recent trial of Mr. Bo Xilai and his wife, everyone knows that. Mr. Bo, he has a supporter. He has supporters in the political elite circle of China. Mr. Zhou, who is a member of the Standing Committee of Politburo, the highest ruling body of China. And speculations, I don't know whether it's sometimes, most times speculations are true in the country. Speculation said several years ago why Google was kicked out of China was sort of a conspiracy. They called it that conspiracy. Mr. Zhou and Robin Li, they sort of worked together and accused Google of like the search results are related to porn,
Yeah.
child or something like illegal, and they used it as an excuse to kick Google out of the mainland markets. And it turns out that
So this fits
after-
into my theory of protectionism, that really what you had was favoring a domestic company at the
Right.
expense of somebody else. Now that's I'm saying that.
Right.
But certainly, Google was also given some very difficult things that it really could not follow and maintain the kind of legal standards that the United States required about privacy. I think one of the reasons they got kicked out was that they were supposed to deliver information to the government about anybody at any time.
Right, and then they refused to cooperate with the government.
Right. So it was really their choice to leave.
Well, thanks,
That's
thanks,
right.
Laura, that really helps, it's a real kind of insider's view on this. Who else has a question? Rosemary?
Well, I just wanted to know, if you were king, and there was that kind of stuff, I mean, and if you could fix, sort of make the right paths for this whole cloud to become secure and to be the right kind of situation, what would be the things that you would do? Say, I'm just saying, just imagine that you could dictate, what rules, I mean, because do you see that there should be some government controls? What exactly do you think, what would be like the 3 top things you think could make this work?
The
Well-
first thing I think we really need may be more of a technology solution. I want to know where my data, not so much what server it's on, but I want to know who has what about me. I'd really love to be able to do something other than run an internet search on Richard Dasher and find 1 million results. I'd like to know what kind of data is out there. I think that's a fundamental right everybody has. And I do think that there has to be a solution to your own choice about how the data will be shared. Right now, the US government is implementing this thing called do not, I want to say DNT, but do not tag or do not follow, DNF maybe, but it's like the do not call thing, right? Where you call in and you sign up and you say, I don't want telemarketers to call me. So you're supposed to be able to click on your software and say, do not follow me. But right now, it's a very blunt instrument. You have to do it with everything or with nothing. And more about what I want other people to be able to see. I think probably having a real advocacy group for the consumer is absolutely the most important thing. people who really understand the system and who are, you know, conversant in the technology and would not have an agenda. I think that's a very important kind of thing. And we've got things that are sort of close. What was it,
And the Freedom Frontier.
Thank you, yeah, Electronic Freedom Frontier, which has gotten a reputation for being kind of on the left side, right, and anti-business. So, you know, there needs to be advocates though. And so that's kind of what I think is most important, is advocacy for the consumer.
What branch of government would be involved in all these things? Labor?
Well, there's one of your
Elizabeth
problems.
Warren?
You know, this is one of the problems. Is it the Justice Department? Is it the Fair Trade Commission? Right now, it's mostly the Fair Trade Commission in the US. China has a Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, which I think is at least a forward-looking way of dividing up the ministry space.
Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I want to also tell you, there's people over there that have their hands raised, and I want to preempt you, but I have a quick one that's related to this, maybe I'll just ask it now. It seems to me, I mean, I don't know enough about laws, but it seems to me like there are things you can sign now, or I assume it's law, that are sharing medical information and stuff like that. Is that, do you know enough about the legal stuff that's similar in other areas, that, and whether or not you would apply that same route to this kind of thing, or?
I have to say, I don't know the situation well enough. And I think that the use of medical information is different enough from other kinds of, you know, market activities. I don't expect my hospital to come out and offer me a discount coupon the next time I need an x-ray, right?
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that the issues there are quite different.
Okay.
And, you know, the real issues there have to do with the payment system too. Because it's not only the medical records themselves, but what about the insurance companies? How much can they see? Right? Yeah.
Go ahead, you first. She's had her hand up before I
Okay.
did. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So on Tuesday night, I went to a presentation by IC Forum on big data and about Hadoop, and it was like mind-blowing what can happen now in
Yeah.
terms of processing data. But the night before, I'd gone to a PMI meeting, and the woman I met was a project manager who is a scientist, and she's working for a company who does robots that are wave generated. And so they're collecting data out in the ocean on a Leica bodyboard that has now gone from the west coast to Hawaii and is now splitting up. So, but my point being that they're negotiating, I think they have a joint venture with Schlumberger and they're talking to NATO. So I wanted you to say a word a little bit about global versus just national
Yeah.
issues.
Okay. Well, as with international business, everything just gets, you know, 10 times more complicated if you have a foreign country you have to deal with. Some of it is being solved by legal contracts where you say which country's laws will apply.
Okay.
But then you have the fact that it's, you know, connected to all this other data that may be in the data centers, and so the third party problems are the ones that really worry people. I think that in regard to a company sponsoring research like that and owning the data, Stanford mechanical engineering professor Chris Gerdes has got a robot, an automated, autonomic Audi car that they took up to 120 miles an hour last weekend.
Wow.
Out in the desert somewhere. And so they're getting information about how the car responds and finding out how it compares with human drivers and reaction time and that kind of thing. So hopefully the universities will be enough involved that it will be open domain for some of this.
Okay.
But the international problems are just take everything that's a problem at the national level and just expand it worse, and it's the same situation.
Back to the cloud computing here. With VMware, now that we have the iCloud, Salesforce, Microsoft is in the space, Google, tell me where you think that this will be in terms of the architecture given the amount of use for 5 years from now?
Okay, let me tell you the main principle behind what I think is going to push it. The main principle is going to be how to maintain a good profit margin as services commoditize
Yes.
and the margins shrink. So we're already seeing it in the web hosting services area. They used to call this infrastructure as a service, IaaS.
Yeah.
And then up above that, you have platform as a service. Well, now everybody's playing platform as a service, really, because there's more profit margin. And eventually, I think that you will have a lot of consolidation, but I would look for us to have at least half a dozen big players who are going to be providing this kind of new application hosting and new website hosting, and that seems to be the most reasonable outcome to me, because they will have the sheer scale to do the R&D to keep ahead of everybody else. Amazon's a big player in that space.
Yes, they are.
So, I know you talked about it could be catastrophic type events, and so what I'm interested is if they, like with Stuxnet and Flame and
Yeah.
those big things, which, I wanna
Gauss.
hear what you want us to talk about, those types of things, and when you have information in the cloud, besides, you know, the reporter that got his, the
Yeah.
most recent reporter
Yeah,
that got
right,
his
got
his
everything
stuff
taken.
graded and, you know, save it and print it, but I'm talking
Yeah.
bigger, more things
Sure.
that, but what's your take on that and future trends and whatever?
I'm kind of worried about that. And what really worries me is this impresses me as the IT equivalent of waterboarding. You know, those of us who grew up thinking that America never tortured people and that kind of thing, were really shocked at what happened in Iraq. And I have to say, you know, I don't want nuclear weapons in Iran, but I'm not sure that going in and hacking into all of their computer systems and putting in viruses is really the way we want to solve that problem. Because you know, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And that's exactly where I think something is going to come back that's going to be a terrible computer virus to hit on this side. So I'm a little concerned because if the tools are there, it's really hard to keep people from using them. About the only good precedent we have is 50 years of mutually assured destruction between the US and the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons. And nobody used them, right? So if somehow we can move into a system where people just agree, we really don't want to get into this, that would be good, but it's much harder to engineer a nuclear weapon than it is to write a virus.
Right.
Say if there was that equivalent of something like that here, I mean, now with just economic globalization, I mean, wouldn't that end up having a ripple effect that would kind of go back to fight
Oh,
a lot of them in the end anyway? I mean, you can't really contain it in one place, right? I mean, if something
Yeah.
like that happens, so.
That's right. And indeed, it will be a global epidemic.
Right.
And what would happen? I mean, would it just be sort of like anarchy, or, I mean, how do you see that? Is it like one of those?
Suddenly you wouldn't know how much money is in your bank account. That would be the first thing, is the financial systems.
Mhm.
Then you would probably not know exactly how to pay your bills, right? I mean, it's still based on the financial system.
Mhm.
Then you wouldn't be able to communicate with your friends or your company, right, which is probably more serious at this point. And I think essentially we would run into a non-networked society in a real hurry,
Would your medical records be lost?
probably. Unless they're very clever in saving them somewhere, and they may, but I'm pretty cynical about that kind of thing. I went to Japan's Tokyo Stock Exchange in the late 1980s, and I asked them where their backup system was, and it was across the street.
You
So,
think they could come up with a
I'm
better
sure they're
name?
better than that now,
Come up
but,
with a better name than
but
the
still,
cloud.
how do you, you know, you want the apps to be updated, you know, second by second. And so they have to be kind of accessible to the internet. How do you shut them off in a real hurry? Yeah, and not so much cloud protection. I would do it for things like photographs.
Yeah.
You know, have your photographs with you so that you know where they are, right? You know, I see business opportunity there.
What is the benefit to the individual in using the cloud?
Well,
I mean,
actually, it's
you've
more
been
like,
talking more about businesses and
Yeah.
so on.
it's more like you can't avoid it.
Uh-huh,
If you're using a smartphone, you're using the cloud.
uh-huh,
And all of the things that make life easier, if you use Gmail, you're using the cloud.
uh-huh.
And so it's really become a standard part of the infrastructure.
Like,
And, you know, things like the GPS functions
Yeah.
on your cell phone,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's cloud.
paperless, you know, credit
Sure.
cards.
Yeah.
Stock brokerage, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of that is, and it's saved a lot of trees, you know, that.
I'm
that's
happily
good.
shredding. I don't wanna worry about backup. I figure if that crashes, then,
Yeah.
you
yeah.
know, I'll just say, well, I paid off all my bills.
Yeah, but I file my taxes electronically.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's too convenient.
Yeah, do you do electronic banking?
Yes,
You're using the
yeah,
cloud?
I'm using the cloud, yeah.
That, one of the things that I thought, Cisco does that's interesting is they, did a kind of a social, media promotion, that, carbon credits, to help you understand.
Offsets.
Yeah, well, they did something called, Cloud Work-Life Rewards, where they wanted you to be aware of.
Of how much you were using the cloud.
Yeah, because we're constantly using the cloud. Yeah.
I know it may be hard to believe, but I belong to this Institute for Historical Study. It's a lot of academicians from UC Berkeley from the 70s, and I was at a meeting the other day, and I mentioned the cloud, and they had no idea about it. And I said, well, it's the next big thing, although it's already a big thing. So it's interesting how there are people out
Oh,
there
and
that don't know
outside
about
the
it.
valley. I mean, my biggest worry about preparing this for you is telling you things you already knew, right? You know, how do you make this new and fresh? I bet if you went just as close as Modesto, you know, people would really not know.
Where's
Well, these are
Modesto?
academicians in the
And
Bay Area.
academicians, yeah, okay, good point. Yeah.
But academicians outside of
Well, and outside of the technical fields, right?
Mhm.
mhm.
Although,
so
how many
surprising.
state archives are online now?
Yeah, they don't realize it.
I mean, I like to play with Ancestry.com, and, you know, you find out things about relatives you never knew. Well, I found my grandfather and grandmother's marriage certificate, but nobody knew when they had gotten married.
So, yeah,
It's all about-
yeah, the cloud does some good things. And there was a time when everything was stored in servers on premises. We were all worried about disaster recovery and fires and tornadoes and earthquakes.
Yeah.
Ruggedized servers.
Ruggedized servers.
I
Ruggedized
just have
servers.
one other
Promo
thing.
for some.
Is maybe the cloud
Yeah.
not the best name for this? I mean, it's out of the bag now and it'll
Yeah.
stay, but it sounds so ephemeral, you know?
I love it.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, it just, you know, it's almost like,
But in some ways, it is ephemeral.
it is, but
Because
that's.
you really have
that's the
no
problem.
idea, even the people who run the data centers don't know what operations are running
Yeah,
where.
I love it.
so everyone
It's
is
back to gullible.
forewarned just by the name of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how this is intersected with things like the SOX amendment about internal controls over company data. I went to the WebEx, the old WebEx, it's now Cisco Systems data center down in Santa Clara. And So the person is giving me a tour around and, you know, just rack after rack of servers, and here is a locked door, and there is a window that you could see through the locked door, and there's a bunch of other stuff, and he said, we can't even go in there because one of our clients is a financial institution, and because of the SOX requirements, they must be the only people who have access to this part of the data center.
That's like in a movie.
Yeah, it was
You know.
really strange.
Yeah.
Well, there's some, you know, data that is just, it's interesting, this, whole issue with the Mitt Romney, tax returns, in the sense that, there was a whole discussion, well, no, there was a whole discussion on television about, in some regards, it would be really easy to find his tax returns from a mere logistics perspective, except for a little thing called a felony.
Yeah.
And
This guy who is, the WikiLeaks guy who's now
Yeah,
holding
right.
up the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah, give him a call.
So,
He'll have it out.
Yeah,
and
there you
so-
go.
And so, nobody is going to, risk, you know, that information, however much anybody may want to get a hold of it, and however, you know, it's going to stay private. You know, the man's tax records deserve to remain private, and the law protects that. And that's his right to keep them private, wherever
Yeah,
one.
sure, whether it's a
fault-
good idea or not a good idea.
That is
yeah.
not the point,
I mean,
you know,
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is that the law protects his right. I mean, just like I wouldn't want my tax records to be not protected, his tax records are protected too. It was a interesting conversation, that the pundits were having on television about, no reporter in their right mind was going to try to, you know, even, however easy it might be to hack in and get it, no, or to find resources to get it, was gonna do it.
Well, maybe it's doing it.
Yeah, but it's really not that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
me going to Safeway and Safeway saying, if you join, what is this thing they've got? now? This-
Oh, yeah.
use Safeway,
Yeah.
and so my spam mail has increased, right? Because I joined theirs and I joined Sears, and, you know,
Oh, really?
You're in trouble.
So your little
Yeah,
red
right.
card is enough.
I mean, thank goodness, you know, the delete key's easy, but,
Yeah.
it's, you know, they start sharing this information with
Yeah.
each other, and even if it's sanitized in some way, that they don't know it's mine in particular, then each one of the people that I'm doing business with knows enough about my buying patterns to come up. I mean, I think one of my favorite ones is that the whole concept of price optimization. You've heard that Orbit, was it Orbitz or Expedia? Orbitz, I think, was charging more for
Yes.
hotels for people who logged in using Macs than for people using
Yes.
PCs.
I did that.
Because
I did see
Macs
that.
are willing to pay higher prices.
Oh, my God.
So, think about it. I have heard that if you're running a site like Amazon, and once you get a cookie and you know that this is a person logging in, you can watch every page that they see. And in theory, if they go to a low-priced item first, and they wander around and they look at several items and they haven't made any purchasing decision for a while, you know that they haven't decided on something. So you give them a discount at something higher priced. Whereas if you go straight to the thing that you want to buy, you know, the higher priced item, they won't give you any discount at all.
Oh.
Because they know your pattern. This is the bazaar. It has come back. You know, if I'm gonna negotiate with somebody in a bazaar, I'm going to act like I don't really want to buy this and turn around and start to walk toward the door.
Isn't there an
So
app?
that's gonna happen, that is going to happen in the internet. People are going to figure out that this game is being played, and so you start to play around and do that.
Well, it's already happening in, not just in the cloud,
Yeah.
but in parking. Here
Yeah.
in San Francisco, now from south of Market, where the tech firms are and the ballpark, you know, the Giants are playing.
Yeah.
You pull up to the parking stall, and if the street is empty, the parking rate is one, at the same rate. You put your credit card in, it's one rate. As the stalls fill up, the rate
The rate
increases
goes
to
up.
park. So that's already, yeah.
Wow.
Laws of economics.
We're doomed.
It's like booking a cruise the day before it sails, I mean,
Yeah.
that's been around for a
Yeah.
long time.
So I do think that what's gonna happen is people are gonna figure this out and do everything they can to, you know, play the game to their advantage too.
Well, so one difference with the bazaar thing is you know kind of that if you walk away, they might
They'll
go,
probably say,
but you,
come back.
not everyone on Amazon knows, they don't know the rules
They don't know the
necessarily,
game.
yeah.
But
they
Yeah.
there
don't know
should
the
be
game.
an app that you could run that would, that
There
would interfere
probably
with
will
this.
be.
There will be. Come up
It's
with
gonna be called My Personal Shopper.
Yep.
Oh.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very
My
much.
goodness, this has been wonderful. Thank you.